Nancy Hom is an artist, a writer, a curator, and an arts consultant. Nancy Hom, Bob Xiang, and myself have known each other since the 70s, together in Basement Workshop. We've kept in touch, so I've got to see Nancy evolve over the years. We both got involved in Buddhism and meditation really around the same time, and I was thrilled to see her begin working in mandalas. When I had the chance to visit her in San Francisco, I was wondering whether I would be able to meet and interview her and perhaps ask her this question that was burning in my mind. I've exhibited many artists dealing with spirituality and Buddhism, but somehow it's never come about the way it has come about for Nancy. How her spirituality and her art has, these two threads of her life have dovetailed and become one. We are using this video series because we've worked, for the last 25, 35 years on Asian American artists. We wanted to take this opportunity to do short video interviews so that we could better bring these artists to the public.
It's a very interesting question, how I got into art.
Right.
And in another way, you can say how art found me. You know, I grew up in a situation at home where we never talked about art. It's not like your ordinary parent who's always providing you with crayons and sketch pads and all that. And I had none of that. I had good teachers. I learned about crayons. But the first inkling that something was different about me and art was when I was told to buy an 8 crayon box to bring for art class. So we were going to draw something the next day. And I was not satisfied getting that 8 color box. I told a lie to, I think, my girlfriend, and I borrowed money because I didn't have it. And I bought a 64 pack of crayons. And she was so mad at me because she knew I didn't. It wasn't required. And my mother was mad at me. Everybody was mad at me for wasting my money. Now, why did I feel like I needed more colors? And why did I go out on a limb and buy those crayons? I can't tell you, but inside I knew I needed more colors. And that's the first inkling I had of a relationship to art. Now, luckily, the teacher, I think it was 6th grade at that time, recognized that because everybody else brought in these 8-color crayon box, and I came out with my 64 crayon box ready to go, and my drawing had all kinds of color in it. She recognized it and she nurtured it, and that's the only reason I can, who knows what path I would have taken, or if I might have met up with that path later on, but that was the start of it, and she got me interested, so interested that she thought I could apply to, in New York you have these special programs. And so in junior high school I wanted to be in the special program. Well, I flunked it. I flunked the test for artists. I don't know what kind of test it was. I flunked music. I couldn't sing for beans, couldn't play an instrument because I never had lessons. So I ended up in journalism, which is why I became a poet in a sense, or a writer, because I couldn't do anything else. But in the course of junior high school, another teacher saw me and she recognized something. And the spark there was, I wasn't content with drawing the vase as a vase, I was interested in exploring different ways of looking at that vase. And she saw that, So I credit these teachers really for edging me on beyond the norm. She enrolled me in the Museum of Modern Art. To one of their, special after school, abstract painting classes. And I really warmed up to that. And it was funny in that class. And still I didn't really know what I was doing, but she played music. I heard the music. Suddenly I was commanding all kinds of space on the paper, and she gave us a very short amount of time to do it. Don't think, just do.
Good.
And it was the kind of thing where you have to get out of your head, do not think, feel, and connect with something else that's beyond yourself. So I just took to it like water, just, and the guy next to me he was like, so what do you want me to do? What shall I do? What and there's that kind of thinking too. But for some reason I felt like, this is fun. This is, and the music was coursing through me. That was another hint, But, and that teacher liked me so much, she gave me another scholarship to continue on to another class. And it gave me the encouragement until eventually I went to art school. Around college, when before all the political stuff happened, I was doing my little feature writing, and I ran the school newspaper and stuff like that. But what I liked about being editor-in-chief was not only the control of the newspaper, but that we could cover the things that were happening in the outside world. When Martin Luther King was assassinated, everybody went home, except me, because I lived in New York, and I ran that paper by myself.
Oh my!
So I took the pictures, I typed up the articles, and I ran a skimpy version, but I felt like the news had to come out. And it taught me a lot about commitment and leadership and doing what needed to be done. It was pretty hard. But somewhere along the line too, there was a kind of a not wanting to do what was normally in the classroom. I had another teacher who taught me how to see differently. And I mean, it was like an intense course of all art. I had the formal figure drawing class and the whatever formal class. And then I had this teacher who told us to draw the wind and to go outside and feel things. And I thought, what does he mean, But you have to break through your thinking and a whole semester of that, you start thinking differently. Looking back, I think that was the beginning of a shift in terms of how you relate to the world, and also how you relax into the world by staying open. What that class really did for me was kept me open. Unfortunately, I became, in his eyes, more closed, because then I joined the Asian American movement. And in his eyes, it was a closing, because to him, I guess, he was a white man, and to him, to narrow yourself into a dogmatic,
identity.
Yeah, was closing. And so I felt bad about that, but I think the lessons he taught me stayed with me. All this is to say that I was, from early age, open to seeing things differently and open to whatever mystery there was, thanks to these teachers, and thanks to my own what we like to say in Buddhism, my own karmic, where I moved to San Francisco, where there was a community that could help me nurture my art form.
Right.
And I didn't know what that was until I just kind of sat around. I help other people silkscreen. Not quite sure about this, what is it? And then one day I decided to try it. I volunteered to do a poster. And then I had to do it because I volunteered and I said I would. And they had a deadline and they wanted 50 of them, and I had to ask everybody how to do this thing that I volunteered for. And so then that came out, and I liked it. So I did another one and another one. So then launched that career. Well, it wasn't a career then, but launched that art form. And then a mural, oh, maybe I'll try it. But I'm scared of heights, so I could only paint the bottom. So it wasn't quite the thing for me. But it was also open to trying it, you know. So that evolved and evolved. And then this one day, many years later, I don't know what happened. I observed people doing installations. I observed three-dimensional work coming out. And I did take sculpturing in college, but never really seriously thought about it. But so there was a confluence there. So in 2001, I can't remember how it started, but in 2001, I went to Bali. It was a nice vacation. I was given a grant to spend on myself. I was director of Kearny Street Workshop. I was given a grant to spend, and the entire purpose of the grant is for tired directors to renew themselves. I was given $5,000. And I thought, what should I do with this money? And to be honest, we were in such poor condition that I spent half of it on Kearny Street Workshop. But I saved half of it, and I was sitting next to somebody at a party, and I said, I wish I could go someplace. Where would you like to go? And I always thought about Bali. Oh, I have a house in Bali, and I'm going. You know, I go every year. Would you like to come and stay at the house? There's an upstairs and a downstairs.
Wow.
There. You know? So I went with Mimi Sasaki to her house in Bali and spent a month there. And I had all these ideas about what I was going to do. I bought all my paints and crayons, and I did none of it. I just sat there, observed the culture, and again, I just observed and observed. And we were in a family compound, so I was part of the family, whatever they did, which was mostly making offerings to the gods, to the Hindu gods, this god and that god. But if you spend a month in Bali and you wake up with this intention of making an offering to a deity, and you close the evening, well, in the afternoon you make another offering to a deity, and in the evening you make an offering to a deity. And the deity is an empty shrine in the house where they reside invisibly, but you make the offering to the empty shrine. I'm guessing that must have something, some influence in you. So besides a relaxing time in Bali, I had that as my ritual, you know. So I'm at Shambhala Meditation Center, and I'm trying out the meditation. Right. Not quite understanding what I'm doing, but dutifully trying out meditation. Somewhere along the line, I mentioned it to my friends, and at least two people told me, "Oh, I just got into meditation, or I just got into Buddhism, or something on the path. And they're two very close friends of mine. And I found that very interesting. It's like a synchronicity, because we didn't talk to each other, and nobody knew what, and it wasn't something they wanted to share. But since I mentioned it, they mentioned it, and we each now have taken different paths. But one of my friends, Noreen, she wanted something more, and I wasn't quite connecting with Shambhala. And so we went looking for a teacher. And we found this teacher, Toisan, who is African American. And I was really excited because I related to the fact that he was African American. We had to be interviewed, so we met at his house, and he interviewed us, and he was very personable, and I was very excited to learn more. And it turned out that his home was the meditation center, and what Toisan did for us was he opened up his house to only 6 of us every single week. And he taught us from Buddhism A to B to C to D, everything we wanted to know, and a lot of things we didn't understand. But it was exciting to us because in that very personable, very private setting, we got a lot of information about the field, and it was so exciting to me to be learning something new, and with a friend that I just kept on it. I kept going until he moved to Maui, and that's when I felt like a fish that's suddenly stranded on the shore and wondering where to go next. And that's when I told you the story about how I found my teacher, just randomly, haphazardly looking for a teacher and seeing pictures of this teacher around, even when I was traveling, and curious enough to check him out at a talk.
So this teacher is not Toisan.
No, this teacher is the Dzogchen Pompa Rinpoche, who I eventually took refuge with. But by then I've had a few years of Shambhala and a few years with Toisan, so it wasn't like out of the blue I decided to take refuge. I felt like I was ready to. In 2006, when I formally took up with my teacher, asked for refuge, and asked formally to be his student, coincidentally we went to China. So I went to China, fell in love with a scarf. But something about that scarf. And then I took, in 2006 I started going to the clubs to dance. And another thing is one of this practice that I do, one of the teachers there was teaching space awareness. And space awareness is, it's hard to describe how that fits in with Buddhism, but as an awareness, the way she taught it, because she was a theater artist too, it brings the arts into Buddhism, where she taught us to be aware of space. When you come out of that class, you're aware of what's behind you and around you and to the side of you. You're fully aware of, it's like a meditation in space, and we do walk-in meditation too. So I like to say somewhere between the dancing and the claiming of space and that scarf, I suddenly saw myself creating a 12-foot sculpture. And if I'm doing nothing but silk screens, and then one day I shot up and did a 12-foot sculpture, which is something I had never done before. And I did. And it was also that I had the audacity to do it, and the commitment to see it through. Once I said, I would do it, and also the means, because I had a support community. That's what being a community artist really means to me, that when you have some wacky, crazy idea, there is an organization behind you that will support you. And in that case, it was the Asian American Women Artists Association, where I told my crazy idea, and she said, go for it, I'll help you. So, by hook or crook, I won't go into the details of how I made that thing, but it was not easy. 18 feet of silk, and I had to dye it and twist it into shape and all this stuff. But that was my first sculpture, and it felt right for me at that time, and it felt like who I was.
I don't know when you say this scarf, can you give us a few descriptions of what was this scarf?
The scarf had beautiful colors, and I held it up like this, and it fell in a certain way. I didn't quite capture that scarf, but I had another idea for colors. But it's just the gesture. A lot of art starts from gesture, and that's why we spend a lot of time doing gesture drawings. But it was the gesture of the scarf that looked like a dance, and it was me dancing in a real dance place. So somewhere between the dance and the gesture of the dance and my desire to express it in a gigantic sculpture. I was so jazzed by that sculpture, I wanted to do something else. So everybody asked me about my mandala work, because it's the longest running three-dimensional art form that I've had. But it didn't really have that profound a beginning as people may think, and I don't want to pretend that it did. When the opportunity came again by another gallery, I thought I would do a third sculpture. And that third sculpture, I had wanted to do this. I had wanted to do something that expressed this feeling that something new was coming out of me, that I was breaking ties with whatever was tying me down from the past, my Chinese upbringing or whatever was dragging me down. And I was going to hang ribbons from the ceiling of the gallery. It was going to fall into this big circle on the floor. And there were all kinds of things on the circle on the floor. The strings, the ribbons were there, but they were held down with very heavy objects that were rooted and kept the ribbons from flying free. And then I was going to sneak into the gallery and cut those ribbons, release the heavy objects so the ribbons could fly free. And then I was going to, do something in the circle. I can't remember what, but so that was the idea. The ceiling of this gallery is 18 feet high. It was very difficult for me to even get up there. I scrapped the whole ribbon idea, and it was also very problematic, because to have the ribbons fly free, I was going to have fans blowing. I always tend to overthink. So what ended up was no ribbons, no heavy objects, and what ended up was a mandala on the floor, basically. A big circle. And I did the same thing. I wanted to express a changing or evolving identity. So I changed the mandala. Somewhere along the line in my creation of it, I came to the conclusion that a concentric mandala, concentric circles, would be the easiest to put together and also to change, because I could change each row at a time. So I snuck into the gallery 4 times and changed each row. So in the beginning it was all Chinese objects, and by the end it was multicultural objects that express all the influences that made up me.
Oh, goodness.
And I've done this, in several other manifestations, other installations, but that was the first one, and it was called Evolving Identity. And it was very successful, very well received, and to be honest, quite a lot easier to do than something out of sheet metal or gigantic cloth that I couldn't figure out how to flap around. And so I thought it was a great art form, but I didn't know what to do with it until the second mandala, because somebody saw it and said, will you do a Chinese New Year mandala for Oakland, Chinatown? And that became the big shift in direction for me as far as the mandala work was concerned, because for me to do an Oakland mandala meant that not only had I to study Oakland, I had to involve people from Oakland, I had to buy objects from Oakland, and I also had to involve the community, lots of community, because it was 10 feet.
You had to do a 10-footer.
Yeah, I went from a 6-footer to 10-footer, because in order for me to express the entire history of Oakland, I had to have it big. And I was very brash and ambitious at that time. I get myself into trouble by thinking big. But it was really the beginning of my community involvement, People did come through for me. Students made stuff, older people made stuff. Historians gave me the history. I even got railroad spikes in the mandala, because that was part of the history of Oakland. So it was, it was a lot of work, but it showed me the potential of the mandala to tell stories, to bring community together, and also to involve the community in the art itself. And it was the beginning of the breakaway between my art and community art. I mean, I always thought I was a community artist who did work for the community. This is me breaking down that identity so that me and the community together, we're creating art together, or as one. So that was the beginning of that, and I did several mandalas that way. But then I got to thinking that it could also teach us, because each mandala had to break up at some point, had to leave, had to be returned to its source, just like a sand mandala. And as a Buddhist, that's fine with me, because I understand the lessons of impermanence. And the more I thought about this mandala process, I thought it really teaches us a few things. It teaches us not to hold on, that things change, and that we can't possibly hold on. It's not a piece of art that, like my silk screens, you can frame it and they'll be still the same 50 years later. It's there for the moment and it's gone very quickly. Not only that, it's made of little pieces. So each little piece relates to the other. And in relating to the other, it teaches us about interdependence, because that's how we form a mandala, just like life is. Eventually, I got the metaphor of the mandala as life itself. And that kind of thinking has propelled me to do more spiritual-based, to do more spiritually based mandalas, but also to see that the mandalas I've done, by its very nature, is a spiritual practice.